Hello again, and welcome back to Sonata She Wrote, the channel where we like to get just a little bit theoretical. And in this video, part 1 of 2, we are going to be discussing the exposition of the first movement of Schubert's piano trio in B-flat, which he completed in 1828. Schubert himself died in 1828, which calls for a number of questions. Foremost in my mind is whether this piece is representative of Schubert's late style. Late style is a somewhat contentious idea that a composer's style changes in several ways as they near the end of their life. Their music is thought to take a turn towards introspection and a sort of bare bones architecture, sort of paring down to the essentials. Or it might also have qualities of raging against fate. Most composers are lucky enough to be in old age when they hit a late style. That's if they do. But in Schubert's case, it is his own knowledge of the proximity of death which may have caused this late style to flower. If you're curious about this, Schubert's Late Music is a collection of articles edited by Lorraine, Byrne, Bodley, and Julian Horton, which I'll put in the description of this video. For now, let's move on to the music and return to this idea of late style later. Here we have our primary theme. Even at first hearing, you may feel slightly off kilter from this theme, so let's move through it. First, we start off simply. We're in B-flat major, everything seems fine, but by the second and third bar, you're starting to ask yourself, wait, are we going anywhere? The music suddenly realizes this as well. The violin and cello revolt against the static nature of the piano's accompaniment and seem to tear the music apart in bars 4 and 5. The piano strikes back, locking the trio into a predominant 2 chord, C minor, before sliding into the sub-basement to eerily tonicized D flat with an A flat 7 chord. Reeling from this disorienting move, the violin and cello abandon their energetic triplets, and then, sensing the piano is finally willing to cooperate, quickly fall into step with its cadential harmonies, cadencing in bar 12 in B-flat major. This type of analysis, where individual instruments are assigned their own agency, is a theory laid out in Edward Klorman's book, Mozart's Music of Friends, and is particularly useful in chamber music. Let's listen once more, and then we'll dive one floor deeper into this theme. In addition to the agency of the instruments, I also see this theme through the lens of the pastoral topic. We have a tonic pedal, repetitive figures in the accompaniment, and triplet figures in the melody. These 3 qualities, in addition to the key of B-flat, are all signifiers of the pastoral. But, as Robert Hatten mentions in his book, Interpreting Musical Gestures, Topics, and Tropes, there are 2 types of pastoral scene in music. The first is a realistic, and I hope you're hearing those scare quotes, representation of the simplicity of peasant life. It's more rustic, simplistic, and an example would be the town band represented in Beethoven's 6th Symphony by the oboe and the perpetually late second bassoon. It might not seem as though this Beethoven theme has much in common with Schubert's, but notice the tonic pedal of F in the accompaniment and the time signature of 3/4. Although they aren't triplets in the accompaniment, this 3 feel is heavily associated with the pastoral. Our other type of pastoral is the more idealized heavenly representation, often called Arcadia. This will be a representation of approaching the divine through nature. turning back to Beethoven 6, you might think of the final moments of the last movement, where the cow call, heavily featured in this movement, turns into more of a prayer. To my ears, Schubert's primary theme has more of the character of the rustic, earthbound pastoral topic about it. Whether he makes any transformational moves towards the heavenly remains to be seen. One final aspect of this primary theme I'd like to focus on is the G-flat trill in the piano. It bears a striking similarity to Schubert's last piano sonata in B-flat, D960. As you can see, this theme is also locked into a pedal and also includes the ominous trill on G-flat in the bass line. In this piano sonata, Schubert is laying out the initial theme with many of the same character traits of the theme in the trio. Again, we have the pastoral, we have a pedal, and we also have the fatal G-flat flaw. Unlike in the sonata, however, in the trio, our primary theme's initial sense of wide-eyed innocence is shattered almost immediately by the predominant section in bar 5 and turned even darker by the insertion of this G-flat trill. In Haydn's Symphony Lorraine, you no doubt remember how much foreshadowing there was in the slow introduction and the primary theme. Well, it won't surprise you to know that Schubert has learned this lesson well, and in many ways, this theme is a microcosm of the entire sonata. Let's hear this brief P theme once more and start the transition. Our transition begins fairly normally, every instrument exchanging portions of its own material from the primary theme. Unfortunately, we quickly find ourselves in a less than desirable tonal location. This transition is accidentally heading toward the submediant G minor. Schubert opens up a potential MC on a D major dominant lock that certainly would push a potential S toward the minor mode. Fortunately for us, the initially uncooperative piano jumps in to reject this medial caesura and restates the primary theme in the tonic. Much of the initial tonal flaws of this theme are still present, but rather than an emphasis on the flat 3, the piano modulates us into the dominant key of F major, seemingly clearing the way for the transition to reopen a medial caesura in this, a lighter and more positive key. Let's continue the transition into our S theme. poor little transition just isn't up to this task today. Rather than simply staying in the dominant, it again collapses to the new submediant and attempts a half cadence in D minor. Fortunately for us, our secondary theme has the strength of will to appear in the correct key, even without an appropriate medial caesura cadence. Analyzing this section of the exposition raises a labeling problem, the best kind of problem. As you may remember from my previous video on the medial caesura, none of these are normative options for this zone. Our initial proposed medial caesura is rejected by the appearance of the primary theme in the tonic key, similar to Mozart's 40th Symphony. However, our second proposed MC, also in a highly unusual tonal area, is only partially rejected. S does enter the exposition, fulfilling its role, but it rejects the tonal area set out by the medial caesura. You can almost feel the implied harmonies shifting around under the held A in the cello that starts this theme. I'm inclined to label this as MC rejected, even though it does fulfill the rhetorical goal of the MC in an exposition. Let me know what you think about this in the comment section, but we're in uncharted waters right now. A situation like this does not appear in the elements of Sonata Theory as a potential medial caesura scheme. Now, what can we say about this secondary theme? In my opinion, it maintains the pastoral quality of the primary theme, while adding a singing style that does create this sort of heavenly pastoral Arcadia that I mentioned earlier. You may even notice that in addition to the triplet figures in the accompaniment, it has the intervals of a sixth and seventh that were also present in the melodic example from the final movement of Beethoven 6. In so many ways, Schubert seems, to me at least, the perfect representation of this ideal, classical, organic form. These themes are clearly distinct from one another, and yet they're related in subtle ways that tie this tumultuous form together so tightly. Tonally, this theme is very active, but still anchored in our dominant F major. You can see from my analysis that although there are secondary dominants throughout, we are never in danger of modulating away from F major. The secondary theme reaches an imperfect authentic cadence fairly quickly, and only because the piano enters with a high A for its own restatement of the theme. In measure 77, we reach a secure, perfect authentic cadence, which is, in my opinion, the essential expository closure. What surprises await in the closing zone, though? What a surprise! Schubert is certainly putting his own spin on sonata form. The usually workaday transition and closing zones are causing all the tension in this movement. First, everything seems typical. We have this somewhat contrapuntal melody in the violin and cello when suddenly all three instruments slip simultaneously into an F minor chord. They quickly regroup and make it to a major mode, but unfortunately, we now find ourselves in A flat, the lowered mediant of F major. You'll no doubt remember Schubert emphasizing the flattened mediant in the primary theme. Continuing this sort of call and response section, Schubert slowly points us back toward F major, but once there, the music is unsure of how to continue. We're in F major, but it feels unearned. Nothing these transitional sections have done warrants this key area, so how do we get back to B flat major, which we need to do for the expository repeat? The violin and cello recover themselves and open a retransition section. A retransition, or RT, often seen at the end of a development, is a passage which prepares us to return to the primary theme in the tonic key. Although it's not unheard of for this to appear at the end of the exposition, it is unusual, and another indication that Schubert is making the sonata form into something that is uniquely representative of himself as a composer, casting off at least a few of the shackles of the past. He uses an augmented sixth chord borrowed from B-flat major to rework F into a dominant chord. The theme which is played above it is hauntingly beautiful and unique to the retransition. It then morphs into the triplets from the primary theme and returns us to B-flat, initially for an expository repeat, but what about after that? How will the development play out after this tumultuous exposition? Well, you have to check out part 2 of this two-part series to find out. In part 2, I'll discuss the development and the recapitulation. We'll discover just how much of the primary theme foreshadowed the drama of this movement, and whether Schubert can bring us safely to an essential secondary closer. Just a quick word about the recordings in this video. Whenever possible, I will use recordings in the Creative Commons. The recording in this video, and the next one, is the Eroica Trio. It is a live recording, and that's why the sound quality is a bit lower. I think this is an excellent performance, but if you want to hear the piece with a higher sound quality, I made a companion video with a period ensemble from Harmonia Mundi that includes my score and annotations. In the description below, you can find all my sources and recording information. Be sure to subscribe so you can see the exciting conclusion of this trio.